Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad to have you back. If you wouldn't mind, and I know you're hearing this every week, but if you could please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Most popular is probably, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, but it's on 30 to some odd channels. Pick the one that you like the best. And the subscription, it doesn't cost anything, but it helps the podcast business. It's part of what makes it go around. So, and the reviews, by the way, definitely want to leave a review. And while you're out there, go visit globalinvestoragent.com and click on the Learn More button, particularly if you are a real estate agent. Okay, this show's for investors and agents alike. But the point is the market is changing, and you want to build out that part of your model that may or may not exist right now that deals with the right kind of investors. And for you investors out there, visit the site to pick yourself one of these trained agents. They're trained to work with you and me, the investors. They know how to identify, analyze, negotiate on and off market deals for you and I. They're not your typical agent. So, they do pretty good, and they invest themselves too, because they know how to make more commissions now. So in any case, without further ado, let me introduce Dan Barrett. Dan's, he and I have already known each other. I've been on his podcast, and he serves a really important niche, and I'll let him describe it more. But Dan, first of all, thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
No, well, thank you for having me. We were talking before the podcast started. I think what you're doing in terms of your business model and how you help agents, how you help investors is just really cool. I think it's very, very unique. So yeah, man, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here. I'm psyched.
Awesome. Hey, if you wouldn't mind, I know we're going to talk about online marketing, and we're going to dig into this whole crazy thing of Google AdWords that baffles people, but it's vitally important. Check this out. I heard the CEO of eXp Realty say in a room full of 10,000 people, it came to marketing, was just doing a fireside chat. First words out of his mouth, he said, if you aren't using Google AdWords, you are missing out big time. And this goes true for investors and agents alike. So I know we'll touch on that. But if you wouldn't mind, first, Dan, clue people in a little bit of background about yourself and provide some context for the content,
For sure. So yeah, my background is, we'll say interesting, but I originally started off, I did not know I was going to be in the online marketing space. I've mentioned this before. I started off training to be a teacher. So I was training to be a history teacher. And, teachers don't typically make a ton of money here in the States. So, I was trying to make ends meet. I was engaged at the time, was trying to save up for a wedding, all that stuff. So I started freelancing, just doing some online marketing for local businesses. I'd picked up, some website design skills, some basic online marketing skills when I was in college, stuff like that. And I pretty quickly found out that I was making more freelancing than I was going to, 5 years into my actual teaching gig. So at that point, I made a jump to doing it myself. Ended up specializing in real estate investors, which was pretty random. Like I didn't come in with a lot of real estate experience. I just knew that I really wanted to be the best in the world at something. And, I like to think I'm a pretty smart dude, but I'm not the smartest person that's ever going to live. I'm not up there with, the Einsteins of the world, right? So I knew that if I wanted to be the best in the world, I had to focus. Right? Like I really had to specialize. I had to know somebody's industry inside and out. I had a couple of investor clients at the time. They were doing really well. Dan Schwartz, who I talk about all the time now, one of my best friends in this industry, went on to start Investor Fuse at the time, was a really successful investor, was one of my first ever clients. And the thing that I figured out was using Google Ads at that time to find sellers was something that almost nobody was doing. Right? Like very few people in the investing space were doing it. So we made the jump. I started this company called AdWords Nerds, still in business today, almost a decade later. And we have really made our business of just specializing in motivated seller leads. That's what we do, right? We use Google Not just Google ads anymore. We also do search engine optimization. We do some Facebook ads. We do Microsoft ads or Bing ads, as most people call them. We do YouTube ads, all that stuff. But essentially when you boil it down, we use Google to find motivated seller leads for our clients. Typically that's investors, but I mentioned this before, we've worked with some agents in the past, particularly if they're focused on that motivated seller niche. And it's been a wild ride ever since, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's a fun industry. It's always changing. It's competitive. It's just always something new. And for me, that's what I love. I love learning. I love new things. I love problem solving, and it's never boring, which is what I'm looking for. So yeah, it's been a fun ride so far.
Cool. Well, you mentioned problem solver. What's interesting is it's true in any business, in any sector, in any industry in the world is, boy, if you can niche it down, focus and specialize and solve problems because of not necessarily the scope, but the depth of your knowledge, you can make quite a nice living for yourself, So,
yeah, it really does allow you to pattern match in a way that is very difficult to do otherwise, right?
Yeah.
It allows you to just see things a little bit more quickly, and that translates into value for your clients, right? So I don't believe that every business has to niche down as much as we do, but I do know that for me, particularly as a starting business owner, I didn't have a real deep business background at the time. That was the fastest way to get really good at something. And look, investors are incredible clients. Like, they are just wonderful as clients. They are, they're driven. They tend to be really ambitious. They know what they're looking for. They're great people to work for, man. And I'm very lucky to be in this industry the way that I am.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate your sharing that, because it shows that the passion, and that's one of the key ingredients is I always tell people, look, they always say, well, Gary, I don't know how. And I'm like, well, that's why I'm here. I'm going to show you how. What I want to see is ambition and passion. You bring me those two ingredients, I will show you how to channel that energy and focus and niche it down and make a lot of money. So let's go ahead and talk about one of the biggest challenges in this business of investing. And this goes true for the investors themselves. And I'm an investor, and of course I'm a broker, but I'm an investor first. 37 years this month, actually.
Wow, cool.
I started when I was 3, man. Can you believe it? and then
set them up, knocking them down. I like
there
it.
You go. Yep. And at 21 years ago this month, I got my realtor's license out of frustration because the agents weren't trained to help me. Now, wonderful people. It wasn't their fault. It was their brokerage's fault. The brokerage was not teaching them how to work with investors. And guys, put your pencils down for a second and listen. It's not your fault. The fact is, there's a different set of terminology and methodology that you have to learn to attract the right kind of investors and make a lot of money. If you don't, by default, you'll be using the traditional methodology and terminology they use with all other owners of properties, right? Not investors, owner occupants, and it'll frustrate the investors. Believe me, I know from experience. So this solves the problem. So the big problem that I see, Dan, is it's getting the properties, whether you're going to list them to sell to an investor or you're going to invest in them yourselves. So let's talk about that challenge. When did you first realize how important that was? And that's like the crux. That's like the cornerstone of a successful business. If you can start off there and give us a good story,
Yeah, I mean, I think I always go back to that very first investor client that I had. Dan Schwartz, who at the time was an investor down in Baltimore. And Baltimore, I know today, is a very unique market in terms of real estate investing, right? It's actually a market where the culture of the city is very open to investing, right? If you've ever driven around downtown Baltimore, there's a lot of urban blight. There are just a lot of properties that, for whatever socioeconomic reason, aren't really going to sell on the traditional market, right? They're going to go to an investor. So Baltimore has a history and a culture of selling to investors, right? But I didn't know that at the time. I'm just kind of working with Dan and trying to figure out. And so, I sat down with him. I didn't know what an investor did. right? But Dan was about my age. He's actually a little bit younger than me, but we both liked music. So we were kind of hitting it off or chatting about bands and stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's break down the business model so I understand how to build a campaign. And he's like, okay, well, it's pretty simple, right? Like, I buy homes as low as I buy low, and then I try to sell high, right? That's basically it. And I was like, okay, well, that's great. Geez, you must have a lot of money in your bank account, right? You must have a loaded cash checking account or something. Right. You're laughing because he did the same. And he's like, oh, I don't use my own money. And I think at the time I was like, okay. Yeah. And I think I wrote down, like, on my notepad, I wrote like scam ? Because I was like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what that means. So, diving in with him, it's exactly like what you said, right? It's like, for most deals, particularly if you are an investor, right, who you've done the work to understand who your buyers are, right? So if you understand who you're working with, you understand what your window is for the type of deal that you're looking for. If you get the deal, you can make the money, right? Provided that you understand those things. The challenge was always getting in front of sellers, right? And the traditional markets, or the traditional methods, I would say, that investors have used for years and years and years, decades at this point, are the yellow letter, the postcard, the bandit sign. Baltimore literally had a city ordinance about bandit signs, because at one point, and this was on a local news, I think you can look this up on YouTube and find it, there were so many bandit signs in downtown Baltimore that they were literally blowing down the street like tumbleweeds in an old Western movie. Like, they were just like, going like this. So they had to set up like all these ordinances for them. So the problem with all of those marketing methods, there's two primary problems with them, right? One is that everybody uses them, right? And that's because they have worked historically. There's nothing wrong with either direct mail, yellow letters, postcards. There's nothing wrong with bandit signs. Like, I'm not saying those aren't profitable or even necessarily, they might even be the best sort of initial marketing campaign for an investor, right? It just depends on you, depends on your risk tolerance, depends on your market, all that stuff. But those can work. But the problem is everybody uses them. So many investors have had that experience of, you go to the seller's house and you sit down and they've got the stack of postcards, right? They've wallpapered their kitchen with the postcards that they got about selling their house, right? It's just hard to stand out, right? So that's problem number one. Problem number two is there's a deeper sort of cultural shift that's happened within real estate investing, right? And I always will refer back to this guy, Eugene Schwartz, who wrote this really influential book. It's called Breakthrough Advertising. Schwartz was like, like sort of classic ad guy in the 60s, right? Like, he's writing long form copy for magazine ads. You think like kind of Mad Men era, right? Like, that's the world that he's advertising in. And Schwartz builds out this really useful framework for understanding the kind of message that you have to send to your market. And he says that the message depends on how knowledgeable the market is, right? So if you are the first one to ever invent a diet pill, or like, diet pills don't exist, you are the first one to invent it. When you go to the market with a message about your pill, what do you have to say? Well, you have to tell them what it is and what it does, right? And that's basically it. You say, it's a diet pill. It's like a diet in a pill. You take the pill and you lose weight. That's all you got to say, right? Because nothing like that's ever existed. That's what people want to lose weight. That's amazing, right? And for a long time, investing was the exact same way. If you look at all investor marketing, it essentially boils down to, this is what I do, right? If you look at any postcard, what does it say? We buy houses, sell your house fast. And then maybe they say like, hey, I'm going to give you an offer in 24 hours. Hey, you're not going to have any commissions. Hey, blah, blah, blah. But it basically is just a description of the business model, and that's it, right? Now, what happens is markets, when they are around for a while, and there's a significant amount of marketing, a significant amount of competitors, it shifts. Okay. Because in the beginning, all you had to say was what you do. I'm a diet and a pill. We buy your house fast, right? That's all you got to say. But when there's a bunch of diet pills, or there's a bunch of investors, the messaging shifts from what you do to why me, right?
Okay.
Like it shifts from, hey, we buy houses to, I know you've gotten 100 other postcards. Here's why you should choose me. And the problem with a lot of the traditional marketing methods that we still use today, direct mail, postcards, bandit signs, they are still in that first phase. And they kind of neglect the fact that we have all transitioned to this second phase, where it's not necessarily why do I sell to an investor? It's why do I sell to you rather than the 5 other people that are banging on my door, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, what we figured out early was that going online, for one, was a differentiator for a couple different reasons, right? Like one, just harder to do, less people were able to do it. There was a technical barrier there. And then 2, what it enabled us to do was test way more messaging than we could in direct mail. Like I can test 5 different headlines on a landing page in the time it's going to take you to test 2 in a direct mail campaign. And that's being, generous, right? So it allowed us to make this transition way more quickly, and it allowed us to differentiate in a market that was increasingly noisy. And I think that's largely why you've seen way more uptake on this channel in general. Basically, when I started, no investors were marketing online. It was very, very rare. There were a few that were sort of promoting it at the time, but really not many. And now it's kind of a necessity, right? Like, just like you said, if you're in this market, you've got to be online in some way or another. Otherwise, it's just hard to even know that you're there, right?
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a rambling answer, but I would say, like, the thing that always comes down to is, how often are you able to populate your sales cycle, your lead pipeline with potential deals? And if you could do that at a profit, you are going to be able to grow. And if you can't, it's going to be really, really difficult.
Right. So let's talk about that. So we've definitely made a transition. I first started in my very first property. I actually wrote this down to call Socrates, my freshman year college roommate. It was he and I that bought our first 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom ranch in Virginia Beach, Virginia, off of First Colonial Boulevard for any of you 757s out there, and 5 minutes from the beach. And back then there was no internet. It wasn't even. People didn't have desktop computers. It was just coming out, coming out onto the marketplace. There were no laptops. There were cell phones. Back then a cell phone was this big giant walkie-talkie thing in your car if you could afford it, right?
Yeah,
so
I got the giant antenna thing, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, incredibly expensive and a lot of static. And so in any case, here we are now. Literally almost 4 decades later, and man, if you're not online, it's hard to be relevant. I was going to say something else a little bit more not so appealing, but just if you're not online, you're not going to be relevant. So we're moving online, and one of the things I've not done a lot myself, Dan, over the years is get into paying, for Google AdWords. I just never took the time to learn it. I thought, well, I'm already doing well enough with everything else.
Yeah.
But I keep hearing repeatedly from people I really trust, like Glenn Sanford, CEO of EXP. When he says that, I'm like, okay, I got to listen. And all of a sudden, here we are, you and I have this podcast of like divine guidance. God made this thing happen. Serious. So what? Let's talk about that. Maybe some practical stuff. People are wondering, okay, well, what is it? What can I do? They understand the problem, they understand the principles, but how do we stand out in a crowd, especially online? And how do we determine? I know I want to definitely have you share your information, by the way, too, before we're done, as I know people are going to be like me, like, you know what, I'm just going to work with Dan because I know the guy knows what he's doing, and I'd rather, just like anything else, you and I can build a cell phone on our own, give enough time, energy, and money. But let's face it, the Apple has spent billions on developing the iPhone. We don't have billions. Let's just go downtown and spend $1,000 and get the iPhone. Yeah. So that's why we use guys like Dan for all the listeners out there. So kind of kick us off some brass tacks. Like, how do we get started? If I'm an investor or an agent representing investors, what's the first thing I do to implement this part of my business model?
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm super glad that you asked that, and I will jump in there. I do want to take just a moment. So everybody runs their business a little bit differently. We are, at AdWords Nerds, we are very values driven, right? It's a values-driven company. Like very specifically, I don't hire anybody regardless of their expertise if they don't match the company values, right? We always say we hire, lead, and fire to our values. So one of our values is educating the market and being transparent with what we're talking about. So one of the things I always want to say is I deeply believe in the channel. I named my company after it, right? Whether or not that was a good idea, I did it, right? And I believe in it, but doesn't mean everybody needs to do it, right? Yeah. There are always going to be situations in which, like I said, direct mail might be a better fit. Bandit sign might be a better fit. There's no right or wrong, right? There's just what fits you and your goal. So I always want to be explicit about that. Part of what we do, like when people come in to work with us, we will sit down before we ever take money from anybody and spend an extended period of time trying to understand if the channel is actually a good fit. Right. So let's say you've done that. Let's say you're okay, it's a good fit and I want to get involved in it. First thing you want to think about is your tolerance for risk. Okay. Because it doesn't matter who you hire and it doesn't matter how many times I've done this, there is still a risk involved, right? Google Ads is a market. It is literally a market where you have different competitors in your target market that are trying to bid on different keywords, right? So you can think of almost keywords as almost like stock, right? And the price of a given stock will go up or down depending on some underlying economics, but mostly depending on how much people want to pay for it. And Google Ads works exactly the same way. In markets where there's a lot of competition, prices go up. In markets where there's not a lot of competition, prices go down, right? So these are the basic market economics. And one of the things that I always say is, one of the clearest signs that you are talking to someone that doesn't know what they're talking about in terms of Google Ads is how much certainty do they have that they can guarantee a particular outcome, right? Okay. Because, for example, Warren Buffett, greatest value investor of all time, right? Berkshire Hathaway, right? Warren Buffett still loses money in the market all the time, right? It just happens because there's a lot of complexity and a lot of, frankly, randomness that you have to account for. So whenever anybody's getting involved in Google Ads, right, or Facebook ads or Bing ads or whatever your sort of pay-per-click marketing channel of choice is going to be, the thing that I always start with is risk tolerance, because you are taking on risk. And if you take on too much risk, that can be disastrous for you, even if that channel would be profitable for you long-term, right? So one of my rules, as I always say, start with a budget that is healthy and comfortable for you. One of the most common questions I'll get is like, how much do I need to spend in my market? And my answer is always, you don't need to spend anything. I don't know what that means, right? What does it mean that you need to spend something? What's implicit in that question is I have a certain set of goals and expectations. How much should I spend in order to get that? Right. And you can start that way, but I prefer to start with what is safe, right? What is safe for me to experiment with? That could be $1,000 a month. That could be $10,000 a month. That could be $100 a month, right? That could be, whatever. We've got clients spending $30,000 a month in Google Ads. I've got clients spending $2,000 a month in Google Ads, right? So you want to start with what is safe for you. Once you've done that, right, that budget is largely going to define what your strategy is going to be. And in Google Ads, you think like traditional Google Ads, which are in search, right? I go to Google and I type in sell my house and I want my ad to show up to that person. Okay, that's generally what I'm talking about here. There are really, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so there are really only two basic strategies in that channel. You've got high volume, low quality, and you've got high quality, low volume. Okay. And I always talk about like, it's the difference between getting like the king size Snickers candy bar at Halloween and then going to the penny candy store and getting like ribbon candy or like whatever, Necco wafers or whatever for like $1, right? It's for the Necco wafers, you're not going to spend a lot and you're going to get a lot of it, but Necco wafers are not really apologies if Necco wafers is anybody's favorite candy, but it's generally not anybody's favorite, right? Yeah. Or you could buy the one king size Snickers candy bar and that's amazing, but it's going to cost you more, right? So we're talking high quality, low volume or low quality, high volume. There's really only those two strategies.
Right.
Generally, which way you go has to do with what's your budget, right? If you are going high quality, there's typically a higher cost per lead, right? It depends on your team and the back end you have in place. Some people have got they've got like a call, pickup services that are going to answer the phones for them. Some people have acquisitions people. For example, I had a client who was like, look, I've got 3 acquisitions people. They are hungry. I need to feed them, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to take a certain strategy for that person that might be different from if I was going to start my own investing business tomorrow. I'm like, it's just me. I don't like being on the phone. So I only want to talk to the most motivated people, right? So you start to get a sense of your unique business situation, your unique sort of personality traits, the things you're good at, the systems you have in place, and you choose one of these basic strategies, right? So you got high volume, low quality, or you got low quality, high volume, whatever makes the most sense.
Yep.
The other thing that I would sort of caution people to think about is market size. Okay, your target market size. Generally, things get easier for you and your cost per lead declines the larger the geographic target area you can target. So for example, if I'm targeting just my town, generally, not always, we're just talking generally, rule of thumb, generally I'm going to have a harder time than if I'm targeting my state. And if I'm targeting my state, I'm going to have a harder time than if I'm targeting, 10 states or something like that. And this is basic economics, right? What we're doing is we may not be lowering the overall amount of competition, right? We may go after 3 states where there's a lot of competition, but what we're doing is raising the supply. There are more searchers available to us in the broader areas, right? And basic economics, as supply goes up, generally price comes down. Right.
Okay.
So it's generally going to be easier. Now, of course, you have to have the back end infrastructure. You have to be able to handle deals in those markets. Obviously, you don't want to target somewhere you can't do deals, right? Or you're not looking to list or whatever. But that's just some kind of general principles. Once you know those things, am I a big market, small market? Am I looking for high quality or high quality, low volume, or low quality, high volume? And then what is my budget that is safe for me to experiment with? The rest kind of takes care of itself. I mean, we can dig into the specific details of like, you use this type of keyword, you use this type of bid strategy, but Google has made that onboarding process a lot easier. I am a big believer, look, people pay me to run Google ads every day. It's awesome. I love my job. But I'm a big believer that you don't have to pay me, right? Okay. If you have a smaller budget and you want to get started, I promise you, you can do it. You can get started. It's easy enough that you can get involved and start spending some money and experimenting. If that's something you want to do, I think it's totally open, even to people who think, hey, I'm not the most technical or I don't know a ton about it. I think it's doable. I just think that I believe so much in the channel. I think that you want to plant your flag at least somewhere, even if it's just a small radius, couple of keywords. You're not looking to spend a bunch of money, but hey, I'm going to bid on my brand name. I'm going to bid on, my personal name. I'm going to bid on, whatever, my town name, whatever it is. Doing something is really going to have a positive impact over the long haul. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are some things I would typically talk about when I'm thinking about how to get started.
I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for participating in the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Also wanted to let you know that the book, Global Investor Agent, is officially out in print and in Kindle on Amazon. You can get it by clicking on the link right here. If you are an agent, definitely grab yourself a copy. This book, guys, was not just written by me. I also included 8 other investor agents from around the country. And I didn't just handpick them. I literally opened it up to the entire audience. And it was first come, first serve. So you're going to get feedback from brand new agents all the way up to top 25 team leaders. Some on my team, some are not on my team, with valuable insight and instructions and guidance and actual checklists to follow to not just survive, but thrive in this market. I know you're looking for that advantage, and this is it. By the way, if you are an investor, grab a copy for your agent. And for everybody, all profits from the sale of the book, Kindle and print, all go to the Healing House Foundation, 100%. Thank you for doing that too, guys. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, and I know for me personally, in my early days, I would have gone for the volume. like the greater quantity, but maybe low quality. And I've learned, I think a lot of business people learn this too. It's actually better. This is my opinion, guys. This is just my opinion based on my life's experiences, but I've learned it's better to go for the higher quality person, lead, transaction, product, service, whatever. And I'd rather serve fewer of those high quality clients than a lot more of the lower quality clients. I'm just putting it bluntly there. So, yeah. So I'd rather go for the higher end markets where there's a lot of transaction volume and spend the money there. I mean, it's just, mathematically. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always talk about, a good example is Facebook ads, right? We do run Facebook ads sometimes. I always say it very open. It's not my favorite channel. There are probably people out there that do it better than us. But as a channel, Facebook will produce way more leads than Google ads. And it will do that at a significantly lower price. Right. Mm-hmm. So that looks very, very good if you only look at the sort of leading indicators, the sort of metrics that you see ahead of trying to get on the phone with anybody. But what you find is that the cost per deal acquisition, so not the cost per lead, but the cost per deal in Facebook tends to be higher than in Google, despite the leads being so much cheaper. And the reason is a lot of those people, you call them and they don't even know that they contacted you. They don't even remember, right? And they say I don't have a house. I thought you wanted to sell me a house. And you're like, what? My ad says I will buy your house. And they're like, yeah, well, I can't read. And you're like, oh, okay. Right. Well, yeah, Facebook is just that kind of environment, right? They're not looking for you in the same way that if you go to Google ads, you can go after only people who type in sell my house. Right. Yeah. So in that instance, you don't know much about them other than they're in the area that you're targeting, but they have intent, and that makes all the difference in the end in terms of lead quality.
I agree. I've always said, if you build your marketing machine so that the people reach out to you, you already know they're interested, or they wouldn't reach out to you. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different ball game from the old school method, which is cold calling. I remember in the old days, literally, brokers would throw a phone book at you and say, just start dialing. That's an incredibly huge expense in time and energy. It didn't cost anything dollars-wise, but you're not making any dollars, so it doesn't matter, But if you put the message out there, the right message that matches the market and uses the right kind of media, you got that triangle, market, message, media, and alignment, you're going to get much better, much higher quality leads and higher conversion rates and work a lot less. You're not going to have to work as hard to get those golden nuggets and get paydays coming in. So for someone who's like a novice, I know a lot of real estate agents, they will eventually become, versed and somewhat intelligent when it comes to online marketing, whether it's Facebook or Google ads. But most consumers just don't really, they're dentists, they're running a dental practice, and man, they don't have time at all to be doing any kind of stuff like this. But what can they do? Like something simple, like you mentioned the phrase "sell my house." I've got a feeling that phrase "sell my house" is embedded in a lot of different searches. How do I sell my house? What are the 10 steps in selling my house? What do I avoid when I'm selling my house? So selling my house could be embedded in a lot of different contexts. Yeah. But is that a good place to start? And then, can you just go online and Google, placing a Google ad or using Google AdWords? Because I know there's got to be a lot more to it than that. Like you have to create a message, right? You got to create a message that's going to appeal to them. So.
Yeah. So getting into Google ads is going to be a few things. So I'm going to give some people. All right. So if you are thinking about doing this, you want to set up your own stuff. I'm going to save you literally right now, right here on this podcast. I'm going to save you thousands of dollars, thousands of dollars, because the thing to understand when you start to interact with Google on your own, and, look, I'm sure the people at Google are good people. They're kind-hearted people, whatever. But essentially what you need to understand is that Google's incentives are not necessarily aligned with yours as the advertiser. Okay.
Okay.
So what will end up happening is Google has made it very easy to get started. And in fact, many people listening to this may have had the experience of having someone from Google call them and say, I will set up all your ads for free, right? So they're pretty aggressive with it. If you just get started, you go to ads.google.com, that's the website, you sign up, they're going to walk you through a whole process, and you are going to end maybe 5-10 minutes later with a campaign running, right? So we're not talking about, in terms of just getting started, not particularly hard, but the problem is at every turn, and I will tell you, I deal with this every single day because I'm in Google ad accounts every single day. At every single turn, Google will make suggestions, whether they are subtle or not, right? So a not subtle suggestion might just say, they'll say like, hey, I think you should use all broad match keywords. Their number one most common suggestion, they make it all the time, right? Or they might simply make a subtle suggestion by default having certain settings set up when you set up your campaign. For example, when you set up a campaign, they will say, hey, by default, when you set up a campaign targeting Google search, we are also going to include the Google Display Network and what's called the Google Search Partners Network, right? And they say, this is going to get you more traffic. Okay, great. The problem is that both of those recommendations, so using all broad match keywords and using display, search, and search partners altogether, in general, are disastrous for investors and for agents. Okay. So the thing I always want people to understand is you really have to think through the decisions that you make. It doesn't mean it's going to make it super complicated, but you want to think through them because in general, Google's incentives are to drive up your spend, but not necessarily your leads, right?
Okay.
So that out of the way, a couple of things you want to keep in mind. So first thing to know is just that thing I said about search, Google Display Network, search partners. When you get started in Google Ads, there are different networks you can run ads across. So for example, Google Display Network would be like you're on CNN.com and you see like a little image ad that's like flashing on the screen. That's Google Display Network. That's part of Google Ads, right? Search partners would be like you go on ask.com. So it's a different search engine. It's not Google. And you type in something and they're going to show ads. And those are Google ads. And that's the search partners network, right? And then you have the search network, which is you go to Google, you type in like, who is the president with the stovepipe hat and the beard? And it's going to tell you Abraham Lincoln, right? That's Google search. Okay. Now, what most investors and most agents are going to want, where the best quality leads are going to be, where the most leads are going to be, where the deals generally are going to be, that is the search network. That is what we think about when we think about running Google Ads. I go on Google, I type something in, right? Type in Sell My House, whatever it is. The problem is by default, they are going to lump in Display Network and Search Partners Network, which perform very differently. And in general are going to be big wastes of time. So one thing I always say is when you are creating a campaign, one of the settings it'll tell you is it'll say, hey, search campaign, but hey, there's a little blue checkbox and it says, we also included Display Network and Search Partners Network. They just do that by default. You have to uncheck that. Okay. That alone, thousands of dollars in savings. And I know because I've tested it up and down and through the ground a million times. Just trust me on that. Right. Now, the other thing is what I was talking about with broad match keywords. All right. And I will take a moment just to explain how keywords work because we think they are self-explanatory. Unfortunately, they are not. So we're going to take just a second. We're going to talk tiniest bit of theory, and then we'll go into practice. All right. Now, if you go on Google and you type something in, Sell My House Fast, I typed that into the Google box. In online marketing terms, that is a query. Okay. It is called a search query. Sometimes it's called a search term. It's the thing you actually typed in. Now, what most people think happens is when they go on Google, they type in Sell My House, and Google shows them the page for Sell My House with their top 10 websites ranked in order. But that is not what's happening, right? What's happening is that every single person that types in Sell My House is getting something slightly different than everyone else. What you see in Google depends on your location. It depends on your search history. It depends on how much they know about you. It depends on all sorts of behavioral signals that Google takes into account, which might cause one website to show up first for you, but second, for Gary, and third for me. Everybody's a little bit different. So it's clearly not the case that when I type in a thing, I just always see the same page, right? So that's because that search term, that search query, the thing I typed into Google, that's what I'm typing in. But the way Google works is on keywords. And you can think of keywords as a targeting mechanism. A keyword is a way we tell the Google machine what we want. Okay, so if I'm an advertiser and I say, I want the people who type in sell my house, what I'm doing is giving Google a keyword. And it will then process that idea that I want to be matched up with the sell my house people. It will process that idea in different ways depending on how I type it in. So for example, if I type in sell my house in brackets, so I've got these they each look like half a square, brackets for your keyboard, right? So left bracket, sell my house, right bracket. What I'm telling Google is I want people that type in sell my house and nobody else. I don't want the people that type in sell my house fast. I don't want the people that type in sell my house Connecticut. I only want the people that type in sell my house. That's it. So I'm being very specific, right? That's called an exact match keyword. Exact match keywords give you high levels of control. But let's say I forgot to type in sell my house in Connecticut. I don't get those people anymore. I have to specify the keyword. All right. Now, if I put in sell my house as a phrase match keyword, which is instead of brackets, I put that whole keyword in quotation marks. So you say left quotation mark, sell my house, right quotation mark, right? What happens is Google will say, you want sell my house. That's clear. You put that in there, sell my house. But what I'm also going to match you with is sell my house in Connecticut. Maybe you want to sell my house. How do I sell my house? Sell my house fast. Basically, variants that include sell my house, right? So when I use a phrase match keyword, what starts to happen is I'm giving up some control to Google. Right? I'm allowing them to match my ads with things that I didn't think of ahead of time, but I'm also getting in front of all that stuff that I didn't think of ahead of time, right? So maybe I wanted sell my house fast and I didn't think of it. Phrase match will take care of that, right? So if I want to be in front of all the variants of sell my house, I only got to put it in there once in phrase match format, right? Now, what Google will very strongly recommend that you do at every step of this process and ongoing pretty much every week, it will say you should change your exact match or your phrase match keywords to broad match. Okay. And broad match is basically like saying, hey, sell my house, the topic, not the words. I don't really care about the word sell or my or house. I want Google to think about what the topic means and match me up with anybody it thinks matches that topic. So for example, I target sell my house as a broad match keyword. I'll probably show up if someone types in sell my house. I will also show up if someone types in Zillow. Right now, Zillow, not anywhere in the keyword I gave it, right? I never say Zillow either anywhere, but Google is going to say, well, Zillow is where people go to sell their house. You want to sell your house. Therefore, Zillow and sell my house are the same. Okay. The broad match keywords, you give the most control up to Google, the vast amount of control up to Google. I always say broad match keywords are like saying, Google, take the wheel, right? You're just going like this. Google's going to drive the car for you. And that can be great. It puts you in front of a lot of people, but it's very noisy. There's a lot of variation and the lead quality tends to go down. Okay.
Right.
So the thing that you want to understand when you get started is these what we call match types. Am I using an exact match keyword, a phrase match keyword, or a broad match keyword? Are the primary drivers of those two strategies I mentioned earlier, right? You either have high quality, low volume, or you have low quality, high volume. Well, broad match is a low quality, high volume. Exact match is high quality, low volume. Phrase match is kind of in the middle. So you want to understand, like, what is my mix that's going to get me the closest to what I want, right? Okay. I'll stop there because that's a lot of information. But
that was really good, though. Yeah. I mean, people need to know this stuff, and I had no clue about, turning off some of those options that they offer to you, because they're geniuses, because our mindset would be, well, it's Google. It looks pretty good. We should check that because of the wording, It's amazing. So, well, let's do this. I know we're probably getting short on time here, but would you mind sharing, like website? Maybe if you got a free chapter in a book, or for your own podcast, and they share with everybody listening right now, and how can we get a hold of you? Because I know I'm for everybody listening here, I'm going to have ask Dan to teach my global investor agents in one of my Monday Night Live classes. And I think you should be there too. We'll post that. That's how important I think this subject is. And I don't often do that. Think about the podcast. How often do you hear me say that, guys? So this is extremely important to your success. The best of the best have been telling me this, and I'm finally listening. So anyway, sorry, Dan, go ahead and.
No, I appreciate that so much. So my website, it's AdWordsNerds.com. So AdWords Nerds. You can just Google that, you'll find it. If you go on that website, you can do all sorts of stuff. You can request a call with my team. But if you're looking to learn, so one of the things I always point people to, up at the top, you'll see a thing that says services. And if you click that, there's a thing called the Ultimate Guide to PPC for Real Estate Investors. You can Google it, you'll find it as well. So it's called the Ultimate Guide to PPC for Real Estate Investors. I wrote this last year. It is, I think the last time I checked, 45,000 words long. I mean, it's basically like, my goal was to make this blog post significantly better than most paid courses on Google Ads. And I think it is. It will literally take you from zero to pretty darn sophisticated if you want to put in that time. The other thing you can think of is I'm on YouTube. You just search for AdWords Nerds, you'll find me. I do all sorts of interviews. Obviously, I have a podcast and everything, and I'm very active on there as well. And I do all sorts of tutorials and trainings on there. Then, of course, if you want to just talk about whether this makes sense to you, you can jump on a call with our team. We're always happy to do that for free. And we try to make those calls super valuable as well.
Okay. The key here is if people simply search AdWords Nerds, if they could, find the YouTube channel, the website.
You will find us. If you Google us, you will find us. AdWords Nerds. Just type it into Google, and you won't see an ad because I try to. But we'll pop up there, and you'll find it.
That's the irony, guys. This is real test. I'm sure he'll be popping up on the first page.
It's like, hey, I don't have to. I did my own SEO. It's funny because we did run ads for a long time, but I was like, let other people bid on our name. It's fine. People will find us there. So just find me online. That's the way to go.
Yeah. By the way, that's something else that's always kind of stumped me too, is the correct, I guess you call them keywords and things like that are in the content of your websites and your Facebook present, your whatever you call that, not your account, I guess, your Facebook page. Sorry. All those things really matter. And that really also really matters is that they're in alignment. Like there's across the different platforms, there's continuity there. And I know that at the concept, but when comes down to it, I don't know how to open all that up and put all those things in there. And it's not my not in my lane. So in any case, I know I just told everybody we're getting short here, but listen, guys, please leave a review for this one. Okay. Go to whichever channel you're listening to, iTunes, what have you, and please leave a review, because that really is the gas that makes these podcasts go around. And we don't get paid. You don't have to pay for it. It's like a community service kind of thing. I don't want to sound like I'm pleading, but it really is important. And believe it or not, when you do that, then sometimes some good things come your way, because the speakers and the hosts review those things, right? And you could find yourself on a receiving end of some pretty good stuff there. So in any case, keep that in mind. Please visit AdWordsNerds.com, the YouTube channel. I'm sure is probably Facebook also, the same name.
Yeah, you can find us everywhere you go. We'll be there.
Perfect.
Even TikTok. And TikTok, I was late to TikTok.
Cool.
I'm a little too old for it, but I'm on there too. Anywhere you go, I'll be there. Fine.
I am too. I don't know how to. I have an admin that does that, but it's working. We're getting like little videos with 40,000 views. I'm like, really?
That's awesome.
And all I'm doing is talking for 10 seconds or something. It's crazy, but so all that's possible, guys. Whether you're an investor or an agent, and while you're out there, definitely visit globalinvestoragent.com. I mean, my gosh, the time couldn't be more perfect to learn more. Click on the Learn More button, and we'll go from there. And I'll see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. In the meantime, God bless you and your families.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.